Hey, welcome to Ivy Faith Stories. On today's Faith Story, we have Kate Pearce. She's a member of the Ivy community. I think she's been here her whole life, actually. So it'd be really great it's great to have Kate on and just to get to know her a little bit more and really what her experience has been from her perspective and her viewpoint during this whole crisis and what God is doing in her life at the minute. So Kate, great to have you.
Yeah.
First question, I guess, to provide a bit of background, what would you have been doing prior to lockdown, prior to the current COVID-19 crisis?
Well, I was in college. I was at Zavarian College in lower sixth, so year one of two. I was studying English language, sociology, and psychology. So that would be kind of what took up my weeks. There's not really much else to say because when you're in full-time education, there's not really a lot more going on apart from kind of I did some dance clubs. And I went to the older youth group at church, and obviously church on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty much the basic week for me.
Hmm. So I guess obviously since lockdown, you haven't been able to attend college, but you still have, I assume, college work to do. Like, how have you managed to cope with that?
Well, my teachers kind of take their own stance on it. So we've been using Microsoft Teams with one of the lessons in Google Classroom where they kind of set work for me to do. It's definitely very different to college because without that kind of face-to-face, you have to do a lot of it kind of like filling out worksheets and you feel a bit like you're in primary school. But it's a lot of kind of watching videos so that you can keep kind of hearing like a voice of someone rather than always having to read it, which is good. And they're good at kind of setting the work when the lesson would usually be. So you kind of keep your timetable a bit. But it's very different kind of navigating it yourself. And if there's anything you don't get, it's kind of hard to word that in an email to be like, I need help on this. And then kind of getting through their email back. Kind of, oh, hello. Yeah, kind of email isn't very helpful when it's kind of teacher student. It's a bit of a difficult one.
Sure. So has it been like extra challenging for you then to keep to the workload? Because I guess you have to rely on your own discipline, your own habits. Like, has that been easy, hard?
Yeah, that's just my brother there. I did tell him that I was on a call, but I think he also decided it was
Wanted
okay
to
to
make
come
an
in.
appearance.
Sorry, what was the question? Josh just completely
Like,
distracted me.
that's fine. So, having to do college work at home then without having that routine, without having the classrooms, without being able to go to the lessons, I guess, how easy or hard has it been for you to adjust to that? Because it relies then on your own discipline, your own, like making sure that you get up on and do the work that you need to do throughout the day. What's that been like?
I make sure that when the work's set, it goes back to them that day. Otherwise, I'll completely forget about it. Because I used to have kind of all my like homeworks and assignments in my phone on my calendar, but I stopped checking the calendar because there's nothing in it. Like, kind of there's nothing like, oh, I need to remember on that day I'm seeing that person. Kind of I forget to write things down. So if I don't do it kind of as soon as it's set, it will completely go out of my mind because there's no kind of structure in my brain anymore that's kind of, okay, what's due on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. But I think the morning lessons definitely don't get submitted by the end of that lesson, if that makes sense. So if like my lessons in the morning would be from 9 to 11:30, so I definitely don't submit it by 11:30 because I wake up at 10. So it doesn't get submitted by 11:30, but it'll get submitted that day and my teachers haven't complained. And I actually think that quite a lot of people might be getting set work on a Monday and submitting it on a Friday because people have completely lost all sense of routine. So my teachers have been quite complimentary on kind of my sticking to a schedule. So my kind of collapsed version of a schedule is a lot better than other people's. So from what I've seen from like teacher feedback, they are really complimentary on what I've been doing and how I've been getting it done. So doing it as soon as it comes in is the way in lockdown, so that it doesn't get forgotten about.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, interestingly with this, what's the reaction been with, you know, the people around you, the people you used to hang around with, your friends, for example? Because I'm assuming that they're not all Christians. You know, I'm assuming, you know, people from lots of different backgrounds. You know, what's kind of been the main thing, you know, the main thoughts and the main kind of things you guys are talking about?
Yeah, a lot of my friends from college are just so upset that Leeds Festival is cancelled, because they were so excited about it, and it's kind of the thing that they've looked forward to all year, and it's the end of the world that it's over. A lot of them have been, although they might not have liked the education side of it, they loved going to college and seeing all their friends and things. And from having 5 years together in high school, because I stuck with a lot of the same friends, they definitely liked having kind of the freedom of college. So I think everyone really adapted to it nicely. So not having college and having kind of just to, you know, sit about in your own house with your own family, I think a lot of my non-Christian friends are finding that a lot harder than me. I mean, I think I'm quite introverted anyway, so it's not kind of awful for me to stay in the same house, and I quite like my family, so I like being around them. But I've definitely got the impression that, you know, they're sick of it and they really just want to get back to real life without all the restrictions and things. And they just really like their festival to not be cancelled, pretty much.
Yeah, I like that shout out to the Pearce family. You like your family. That's that's good. Great. And like, what do you think is the difference then, like for you being a Christian compared to other people who are not? Like, how has that helped you in this situation?
I think being a Christian, simply from having church, means that there's so many people that I can keep in contact with. And they're kind of people that I might have kept in contact with online anyway, because say they go to a different site or something, I don't just see them face to face all the time. So it's not that kind of like immediate, I need to see their face kind of thing. And I've got this kind of community behind me. So church has, you know, like adapted and gone online, and I see that every Sunday. And I go to the hub group on a Monday night, and that's online. And kind of on a Thursday, the hub splits from boys and girls, so we have like a girls Zoom on a Thursday. So I've kind of having church wants it to like never be that you're on your own and you're not seeing anyone. So it's completely like you have people even though all this is going on. Whereas I think when you don't have church, it's more of a kind of, oh, like, how am I going to see these friends? You know, like I used to see them just in person. I used to see them at the end of the street kind of thing. So mine are more like spread out, so I'm a bit more used to not seeing their faces all the time. So I feel like I adapted a lot better with having church adapt along with me.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah, 100% it does. And so, you know, other people maybe don't have that because they don't belong to a church, may not have that as much contact.
Yeah, definitely. Because the church community has always been, you know, what's got me through kind of anything. Because you always kind of, no one ever has all the petty like fallouts and things in church. It always just feels like a nice atmosphere to be in, because you don't have all these like cliques and things and like little groups that you have to fit into. It's all just kind of community and everyone's there for each other. So it's kind of, that's the community I've got, whereas they might not have that same community and they just don't experience it like I do. So although lockdown is obviously so different, the fact that I've still got that and church is adapting to the people's needs and it's still being there and just doing everything just differently, life's stayed relatively normal, if you can say that, on
Mm-hmm.
the kind of people front. It's just that they might be in my screen rather than sat next to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, yep. Virtual high fives and virtual hugs, all that kind of stuff. What's been the best thing then, you think, since like the church has moved online for you, that you've really appreciated and noticed?
I feel like just the way that people are coming together, kind of, even if you just look at the worship, you're seeing kind of the lead singer might be from Shawston, and then the backing singers might be from Didsbury, and then the guitarist might be from Fuse, and then kind of just seeing all these different people coming together on the same screen, kind of, and like say on a Sunday, if you really wanted to see someone and then they're ill or they're just like not there, usually on like the Zoom calls after the service, everyone's there just because you've not got much else to do and you've probably had church anyway, so you probably just go straight onto the Zoom call and you get to see like everyone's little face on your computer screen and kind of all these people together. I just really like it. Kind of notice community in church and out of church. People, even though they can't be next to each other, they're actually all coming together in one place, and it's really nice.
It is beautiful, isn't it? It really is. You mentioned something, Kate, before. Interestingly, online. You mentioned like cliques and groups and people trying to fit in, right? Because with technology, and we're using it, the churches are using it in such a great way now, using Zoom and Facebook. You're in a generation where these things are like, it's like an extension of your body, like the smartphone and having all of those social media apps. Does that cause issues in terms of like how people are portraying themselves online? Have you experienced that yourself? Cliques, groups, people being left out. What is that like?
In lockdown or just in general?
I guess in general, I don't know if lockdown increases the volume of people doing it more online because they don't get to see each other face to face. But is there, yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of on kind of Snapchat and Instagram, you can have your group chats. So there's always been a bit of kind of friction around a group chat, because if you felt like you wanted to be part of that group or identify as being part of that group and then you're not in the group chat, it's always a bit kind of like awkward. And that's definitely young person lingo, kind of having a group, because that's where kind of the cliques, when you've had your little like groups that you might have like eaten lunch with, you then have that group chat with, whereas kind of it's more solidified, where people, it's very obvious if these people don't want you or a person around, that's when they'll purposely not put you in their group, if that makes sense. Or you can have a private story on Snapchat, and if you're not like on that person's private story and you can't see it, it's like, oh well, they don't want me to see their life, they don't want me to be their close friend. You can kind of see that with what people let others see is how they kind of say, these are my friends and these are the ones I like and these are the ones that I think are good enough to be around me, kind of thing. So that's always been quite apparent. And kind of now you have groups of friends get together and have like a quiz night or have like a Zoom call together, and then like the certain groups will have their group night. I mean, I have them too. I've got a friendship group that I'll have my Zoom quiz with, but it's kind of, the groups stay groups because it's the people, when you're not face to face with them, it's the people you choose to talk to and put your time into, when you're not just around them.
Yeah. And I guess that's a good thing on one hand, because you can develop those close relationships with the people that you want to. And on the other hand, there could be people that are like feeling left out and feeling excluded. There's that pressure, isn't there?
Yeah, it can definitely go two ways, because it can be kind of, oh, I want to share my life with you and I want you to see all these things, or it can look like, but I don't want you to see all these things, kind of thing.
Mm.
So it, as with all social media, it can be really positive and really negative.
Mm. Sticking on the theme of social media there, a lot of communication happens online in groups. Um, the topic of bullying,
Mm-hmm.
um, how much of an issue do you feel that that is, and how easy is it for that to happen now with so many different ways of communicating online?
I've always seen the types of bullying that I've either experienced or seen happen is bullying is so much more subtle now. Kind of, I think the reason why so many schools or social media platforms aren't able to kind of go against it is because it's not just, throwing food at someone or calling them names or something. It doesn't happen like that anymore. It happens so much more subtly with kind of I mean, it can happen with calling someone names, but it can happen with sarcasm now. Like the different ways that you can use it, it can either come out as like a really funny joke and you both kind of get it, or it can come as like kind of passive aggressive, but it doesn't immediately look like bullying, but that's what it is. So I think it's definitely more prevalent because you don't, realize when it's happening, and people can like target things online towards someone, but no one knows it's being targeted at someone apart from that someone who's being bullied. So the social media platform or whoever's following you wouldn't actually know that you're bullying someone because they don't understand what you're saying. It's much more tricky because people have become so sly about it and so clever about it, which
Yeah.
is where kind of you always see kind of like parents or groups of like mums or whatever being like, oh, I wish the school would do something about this, but it's a lot harder to do something about it now because it's so clever and disguised now.
Sure,
Definitely.
yeah, really hard to identify, right?
Yeah.
And yet then the person who maybe was meant to be the target does know it. Like it's quite obvious to them that this was
Yeah.
targeted at me, and then they're suffering for it, which is maybe what the person who sent it out
Yeah.
intended. Um,
It can also make it hard if they kind of said, if they reported it and said like, I think that I'm being bullied, and kind of tried to give like the evidence, other people might not take that as bullying and might say, well, why, kind of you're being a bit sensitive about that. I don't think they meant it in a malicious way, whereas you're the only one that kind of knows what they meant by it. Kind of people wouldn't put like think of that as bullying or think of that as a hurtful comment, whereas you do. So it's
mm,
harder to kind of shut down because people don't get you.
wow, that's Kate. You're really aware of this. Like, what do you do in those type of situations when you notice these things?
With myself or with other people.
Both.
Um, Often when I notice them with other people, it's kind of people that I'm not really friends with at all. So it wouldn't be kind of appropriate for me to step in. And I'm not saying that I like go around and I'm like, oh, that's bullying. I know, I've got all the like, no, I don't actually notice it that easily. But with myself, I just sort of brush it off because I've kind of, it's been not bullying. And I'm not going to tell a sob story and say, oh, I've been bullied my whole life. But kind of friendship groups and cliques have always been like an issue for me. Like, I've never really had kind of in high school, I never really had that friendship group that was like, oh, these are my friends, these people I belong with. And it's always been sort of like, oh, I feel like these are my friends, but they could also be my friends. I don't think these people, get me, but they're my friends too. It's always been a bit of like a jumble. So I've learned to just brush it off, if there's kind of like a sarcastic or passive comment that's made, I just sort of learned to not care, because I've never, not never, but like if I don't feel really invested in this group, I kind of don't care if they don't think I fit in, because I know I don't fit in. So it's much easier to brush it off when I'm kind of like, I know I don't fit in this group. This is just me trying to survive high school. Like, I know that outside of school, I've got like some really nice, friends that I hang out with at dance, or these friends that I hang out with at church and things. And I just sort of, I'm like, well, I know I don't fit in, so you can really say what you like. But it stopped bugging me by about year 9 or 10.
Wow.
I'm just like, I know I don't fit in here.
Wow. That's awesome, Kate. I mean, that's incredible. I really admire your maturity about this and your resilience.
Thank you.
Now, what would your advice be to somebody who, does feel pained and hurt by, being the subject of some of this discreet and disguised, like sarcasm and passive aggressive comments and words that hurt?
Honestly, the people, it took me a while to kind of act this out myself, so it's a lot easier said than done, which is what a lot of advice can be. But the people making the comments, either kind of, I wouldn't want to say they're jealous of you, but quite a lot of the comments that people make about you can come back on themselves. So like if people make fun of the way you look, it can often be because they have a lot of insecurities about the way they look. Or so it can either be that the people making them are actually trying to bounce off their own, pain towards themselves on you, or they're really just not your friends. So it's hard to accept that. And I've definitely stayed friends with people who I know don't treat me properly, like I say, because I just brush it off and don't want to cause anything, because it's a lot easier to just be around that person but just leave them to it, but still be around them. So it's kind of, you just have to learn to be a bit more kind of pick your fights. So if it's obviously, if it's causing you pain and grief, then obviously don't be around that person. But quite often it's easier to be in the presence of them, but just completely put them out your mind and just allow them to say what they like, because it probably just makes them feel better to make someone else feel the pain that they're feeling. So it's often not because you're a horrible person and you're really ugly and you've got a horrible personality. It's just because they need to put someone else down to build themselves up and feel better about themselves.
Yeah, it's great. Another incredibly mature and insightful answer. Do you think, Kate, that a part of how you're able to deal with it is because even if you're not accepted by other people in certain groups, being a Christian, that you're accepted by God, that you're accepted as who you are? Do you think that there's a gap there then between the people that don't know God and in similar situations to yourself might find it more difficult to deal with?
Yeah, definitely, because if you had, if you had any of those kind of comments or situations, that there's a million different places in the Bible where you see that you're kind of, God knows every hair on your head because he put them there. God knows exactly what your how your personality works, because that's what he wanted you to be. And it's kind of that sense of why you're here. Kind of, I always think in situations, all these difficult situations or like difficult people that you're around, just remembering that there's a reason that you're in that situation, and that's because God put you there, and God is either teaching you something about yourself or your life, or God wants you to be there because he wants you to do something for someone else. So it's kind of always remembering that you're made the way you are for a reason, and you're in these situations because God wants you to be there and God wants you to talk to these people. And kind of that's one of the things I miss about lockdown is throughout my life, kind of one of the prayers I say every morning is like, I pray for like good conversations and for like my conversations to feel meaningful, because in just really normal everyday life, these tiny little like crossovers between people and conversations you have are so meaningful and can really make a difference in your life and other people's lives. And that's obviously something I've learned from being a Christian, having Christianity around me, kind of knowing that everywhere you are is because you need to be there.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Kate. Really encouraging words there. Your prayers have been answered. Final question here, and this is just, final question. What's the first thing that you're going to do when lockdown finishes?
Oh, that's a tricky one because there's a lot of things.
There's a lot, huh?
Lockdown. It's a similar one to what my brother's been saying, and I think it's just I want to get all my friends together and like be in person with each other. And even if it's kind of what I talked about earlier of like different friendship groups and different like cliques and things, just getting everyone together and just being like, look, we haven't been able to be less than 2 meters apart from each other. Let's just all be together in the same place, you know, like in my back garden or something. I just want to be with people again. I've like proper human contact.
That's good.
And maybe a Nando's.
Nando's, that's perfect. Love that. See, even introverts do miss social interaction. Great. Kate, thank you so much for your time. Love your answers there. And there will be, given so many words of encouragement to many. So God bless you, Kate.
Thank you.